the 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 very challenging environment for white supremacists in the world right now is making the Swiss and those who look at Africa as a place where they can go and kill and the lives there don't matter. Do you think this will that the atmosphere since the death of George Floyd and the world reaction to it, do you think this will make a dent in terms of how they start viewing Africa and how they start treating the humans that were created by God in Africa? I have my very analytic friend on the phone, Terence Bangawakai, and there's a story that I am engaging Terence with, and that story is a story that just came out, I think, like a week ago, and this story involves Israelis in Cameroon. Now, the first time I heard about Israelis in Cameroon, it had to do with the Legnos situation. At the time, what they said was that Israelis went to Cameroon and tested a bomb in Legnos and it killed people and animals, and that was the story. And the media did not say that story internationally. They carried it as carbon monoxide that exploded and all that. But we of Ambazonia and the people of Cameroon knew that it was Israelis who came and tested a bomb. Now, that was never proven, but there's a more recent story that has been proven. And this story is well documented by two reporters who painstakingly told the story and titled it "Making a Killing." At the center of the story is a man called Eran Moaz. But this story is not only about Mr. Moaz. It's also about Mir Meyuhaz, his son Sami Meyuhaz, Abraham Avi Sivan, and General Erez Zuckerman. Four of them are Israeli military men and who came to Cameroon and counted their fortunes in millions, all made through bringing death to this African country, Cameroon. Evan Moaz did not start out in Cameroon as a military man, but quickly found out that as an Israeli, the quickest way to make money in Cameroon was to be a military man. And he pretended to be one and obviously made millions. That's the story that is being told by Mr. Emmanuel Frudenthal and Yuri van der Wit. So, Terence, I'm engaging you so that we take on the story of Eran Moaz, but this story is not, like I said, it's not only about Eran Moaz. I think it's more a story about Israelis in Cameroon and the killing they're doing there in terms of money and the killing they're doing there in terms of Cameroonians. Tell me a little more about. Have you read this story, by the way?
Yes, I did read this story.
And tell me what you think.
Well, I think this story, generally speaking, demonstrates how Cameroon is quote-unquote governed. Here you have the president of Cameroon, who engages essentially mercenaries, as is headlined in this story, and creates a private army, a militia that answers to him and is not part of the command structure of the national defense of the state. So it shows Cameroon as a worse than a banana republic, if you want to use that term. It is a one-man show. An individual who has been president for close to 38 years and who has been at the highest echelons of the neo-colonial bureaucracy in Yaoundé for about 60 years.
Yeah, I'm glad you're putting 60 years, because when people say he's been there for 37 or 38 years, they're forgetting the other years that he was still a very influential bureaucrat.
The prime minister before becoming the president of the country.
Do you think that he was? There have been speculations. Do you think that he was just the secretary at the presidency and prime minister, or you think he was playing a more deep role?
Well, there have been speculation that Mr. Paul Biya was identified as a young man. I think in the Cameroonese political circles, they call him an ajulatiste. You know, there was a French operative in Cameroon called Ajula, who apparently recruited certain young Cameroonese, and Biya was amongst one of those who was apparently recruited. And the speculation is that he was specifically groomed to play the role that he's playing today, and that he was parachuted into the Ayijo administration as an agent to keep tabs on Ayijo for the French, and they groomed him all along and managed his career, and eventually he was elevated to the highest office of the land.
Mr. President, to His Majesty the Honorable Dr. Professor Mighty King Paul I of Cameroon, the Sultan of Sultans, Fon of Fons, Paramount Chief of Chiefs, and the first citizen, who is equally the head of the executive, the head of the legislative, the head of the judiciary, the head of the armed forces, the custodian of national seal, the guarantor of national peace, the head of state, the head of everything of Cameroon, also performing the task of appointing and dismissing ministers at will and bringing opposition to their knees.
And I believe he has served the French even beyond the wildest and most optimistic dreams of the French. He's been the perfect agent of the French in Africa over the last 60 years of his life.
Yes, that is a story, but where this particular story about Mr. Aaron Maus starts is that Biya did not trust the French, and that's why he turned to the Israelis, and that was in 1984. Some actually thought it went further than that, but it is said that he started engaging the Israelis from '94, when after there was a coup against him, a failed coup, and so he thought that the French were involved. And you know, when I read that part, I was a little concerned. Or I was a little doubtful because of the same story you just told. How would the French prop him and then turn around and be the ones having a coup against him? Did he do anything that you think the French would not be trusting him anymore? You have any speculation?
what you have to understand is that I think there was some degree of paranoia on Biya's behalf, and he had just come into power after his predecessor had served about 22 years in power. So when you stay in power for 22 years, you have connections, you have loyalties, and Biya may have been paranoid. The speculation was that the man who at the time was called Mr. Africa, Jacques Foccart, had a very close relationship with Amadou Ahidjo. And the speculation is that maybe that lobby, that Jacques Foccart lobby, was behind the coup d'etat.
Yeah, okay.
What we also need to understand is that in this France-Afrique ecosystem, there used to be various strains. There was a time, especially in the 80s and 90s, where they call them in French réseau, which is like a lobby, or where you may have, for example, Jacques Foccart may have his own lobby. You may have somebody like Charles Pasqua, who was also another French official who had his own lobby. Each of them being backed by different, even competitive corporate interests in France, and some of these conflicts are played out in African politics, So that may be the background why he thought that, a certain segment of the French establishment was behind the failed coup d'etat.
Yeah, they wanted him out.
And he sought security assurances from somebody else. What is interesting is that he did not seek assurances to defend the state, as it were, the institutions of the state.
Yes.
He sought assurances for his own personal survival, and the setup of this organization called the Rapid Intervention Battalion, the PIR in French, demonstrates that it is his personal army. It is there to protect his power, to project his power, to terrorize the citizens as part of that projection of his power. And so it has nothing to do with the state of Cameroon or the interests of the Cameroonese people. And I think ultimately, if the Israelis can, sustain and protect a groomed French puppet, that's one less job for the French to do. But I think the French overall remain, as they themselves boast frequently, of Cameroon being a colony, and obviously Ambazonia being a colony of their French colony, Cameroon.
Okay, before we come into B, and I know you mentioned them, and they heavily featured on this article. Let's before we talk about Mr. Aaron Moas, who is the one who is highly featured on this story, let's trace the people who went before him and some of what they did. I think it says here that the first Israeli military man that was hired was Mir Meyuhas. Can you expand on what's the background on Mr. Meyuhas?
Apparently, that was the individual who had the contract with the state of Israel to provide the presidential security with weapons.
Well, before he came to Cameroon, he was a military man in Israel, and he came along with his son, Sami Meyuhas, and they perform. I want to go back before we establish these people. We need to establish that they were performing in Cameroon under a license by the Israeli government. They did not come there as freelance mercenaries. So would you conclude from that the state of Israel was part of this whole setup?
It's obvious from reading the article, yes.
Okay, because they were licensed, and there's an Israeli lawyer who says that by Israeli law, these Israelis cannot be doing what they're doing in Cameroon without the licensing, like I said, and authorization by the Israeli government. So he came there with his son Sammy, and they performed, and their contract ended in 2001. And a gentleman called Abraham Avi Sivan took over, and then he died in a helicopter accident in Yaoundé. The transition is not very. The transition from all these people is not very clear, because some of this was not happening in the public eye. It was all secret stuff. So the two writers who put this together said that somehow it ended up under Abraham Avi Sivan, and then from Sivan, who when he died, General Eraz Zuckerman surfaced as the next commander.
Yeah, let's get the chronology as outlined by the article.
Yes.
Meyuhas, who is described in the article as a former secret agent working for Israel,
yes,
obtained an exclusive contract from the Ministry of Defense of the State of Israel,
yes,
to sell arms to Cameroon. So I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Interstate transactions. Through I guess a businessman, an arms dealer, if you want to call him, if you want to use that term. And so he had a contract which lasted until 2001, and after that there's really no reporting until 2009, when, according to the article, Abraham Avi Sivan created the unit of what later became known as the BIR.
Yes.
Yes. And he served as the head of that organization until his untimely death, I believe in 2010. So he was there for about 11 years.
Yes.
And then the speculation within the article is that another gentleman called Erez Zuckerman, became the commander of BIR after the death of Mr. Sivan. And there's some conflicting assertions here. Mr. Zuckerman claims that he's not been in Cameroon since 2017. Their Cameroonese BIR soldiers report seeing him in 2018 and 2019.
Yes.
And but it seems as if his rule has been transient, and the main man right now is Mr. Eran Moaz.
Yes, Mr. Eran Moaz, who is the star of this particular article. Now, Mr. Eran Moaz didn't come to Cameroon, or didn't go to Cameroon as a military man, right?
Correct. He went to Cameroon, I believe, as a communications expert, working for, I think, a company that worked with the Israeli Defense Ministry. Yes.
Yes, he worked for. I'm looking at the name of that company. I didn't see that I noted it. And like I said in my introduction, I think very quickly he realized that the best way to make money in Cameroon is to be in the military. And when I read that, I was like, okay, how did he transition from a communication technician to become a military man and today the head of B. Any speculations on your part?
I have no idea, and I don't think these veteran reporters they did not clearly outline how that transition came to pass. But it seems as if he had a close relationship with Mr. Sivan. I think Mr. Sivan, he was reporting to him when, Mr. Sivan used to be the military attaché, right, at the Israeli embassy in Cameroon.
Yes.
And so when he retired from public service, he transitioned into becoming, what this article will want us to believe is a mercenary, and as an employee of the, I think the company is called Tadiran.
Yes.
Yeah, as an employee of that company, I think Mr. Aaron Moaz was reporting to Mr. Stephen. Maybe that relationship, that network, is what elevated him to become what he became.
Yeah, but for him to live from a technician, it's said that he's being driven around Yaoundé as either a captain or a general in B. So there must be, and I was just thinking about that, and I'm thinking, well, each Israeli I think they have a system where each Israeli signs up in their defense forces, and so he obviously had some military training as in those military forces, even if he did not have military leadership like the previous Israelis in Cameroon did. It's all speculation.
For all we know, he may just be the executive. As an executive, you do not have to have been in the front lines of the factory. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And he has the role of a CEO, and he has connections which enable Israeli generals and Israeli officers to come and, train, his Cameroonese soldiers and get them ready to go to the work that they've showed themselves capable of doing over the last 3.5 years.
Yes, because it is said that every 2 years about 30 Israelis come down and train B, you remember?
Yes.
So maybe that's what he does. But this article spends so much time talking about the wealth of Mr. Evan Moaz as far as his rewards from Cameroon. He's mentioned to have taken a vacation in the Caribbean, where he was living in a villa costing $20,000 a day. He's mentioned to have a flat in New York that's worth $20 million, and one in a villa in LA worth $12 million. So this guy must have been very well rewarded for his work.
Yes, it goes without saying the investment that the Cameroonese government, or I shouldn't actually say the Cameroonese government, the investment that Mr. Paul Biya put in him, I think has done him some good. What remains to be seen is that did Biya really get his return on investment, given the exposure that beer has brought to himself and to the country, given the atrocities that are being attributed to this organization, and the fact that it seems to most observers that these organization that will want us to believe has Israeli training, Israeli knowledge, Israeli expertise, is being handled by kids who 3, 4, 5 years ago were farmers and Okada drivers, So what has really been Biya's return on his investment in this guy who obviously is doing very, very well as the CEO of this killing machine.
Okay, I think you're talking about the effectiveness of B. And yes, if you want to look at the effectiveness, let's look at the tactics that the B have. You would think that having been trained with the so-called Israeli expertise, you would think they would have better techniques to win a clean war. But it seems to me that all they really have been able to do in Ambazonia, and I think that's where that's what you're describing, has been to burn villages. They're more acting like vandals than some specially elite trained troops, wouldn't you say?
Well, that's exactly what is happening, and that is what has invited the scrutiny to finally bring out this person called Iran Moaz, right?
Yes.
Because what they have done, I like to use, I know we don't throw out this word carelessly, but I really want to quote an American congressman who's also happened to have been to Cameroon. The congressman from Wisconsin, Mr. Ron Kind. He has basically described the actions of this force, of the Cameroonese army. And when we talk of the Cameroonese army, we largely are talking about this deal as, and I quote, as these are classic gradations of genocide, talking about their actions and the atrocities that they carry out.
What you heard here today are classic gradations of genocide that are being perpetrated even now in the 21st century. And it's a call to action for all humanity, because where there are human rights abuses, where there's suffering and oppression, when there's death and there's mass rape, when there's ethnic cleansing, cultural and heritage attack, it diminishes our entire humanity.
And it is something for me personally to put an image, right, of his home in Los Angeles, to have that image of him spending $20,000 a night at a villa in the Bahamas, and then the hurt that somebody like Mami Abdi was burned in.
These are some of the houses here in Bole Bakundu that were burned, that have just been burned by Cameroon, La République military. The houses are all damaged, and properties and monies. All the peoples of the houses are now homeless. We don't know what they will do. And there are about 7 cops here in Bole also that have been shot by La République soldiers. So we don't know whether this is the solution of our Anglophone problem.
Cameroon, as you imagine, may seem like a million miles away from the people here in western Wisconsin, but it is a real event that's happening in our lifetimes, and it must be called out. And there's no country in the world in a better position to go in and make a meaningful impact than the United States right now.
There is something which is particularly evil when you juxtapose these images. This Israeli guy, this non-African, who is feeding fat, and as the article describes, from an off-budget account, because that's how they are paid, and from the Cameroon National Oil Company. He's living in luxury in Los Angeles and New York and Haifa, and apparently has a massive mansion in the outskirts of Yaoundé.
Yes.
And then the people that he trained.
In fact, then just give me a second. His villa in Yaoundé is described as a massive mansion from where he drives around town in a bulletproof car, escorted by a team of bodyguards. So yes, he's doing very well. He's living large.
So you juxtapose those images with the hundreds and thousands of Ambazonians that he's made homeless. It is a particular type of evil that I'm so happy is being exposed. And I hope this is just, the first of many more articles that will come, because this evil has thrived as a result of it being committed in the dark. And I believe that the rebellion of Ambazonia has brought scrutiny to the Cameroonese regime and to the design and mechanisms of how they govern and treat not only the people of Ambazonia, but obviously their own citizens.
Their own citizens who are also rising up in rebellion right now.
Voilà. L'heure est finie. L'heure est finie. L'heure est finie. L'heure est finie. On traverse. On traverse. Paul Biya sort. Allez, on traverse. L'heure est finie. 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 Les gaz ont fini. Paul Biya est parti.
How many people Paul Biya go kill? How many people Paul Biya go kill? How many people Paul Biya?
You mentioned off-budget accounts. I want us to take a look at those off-budget accounts. Remember, some of these companies some of these companies that are invested in this off-budget accounts, when they come and announce the deals they've taken, they've signed with Paul Biya. I wanted to say with the state of Cameroon, but like you've rightly established, Paul Biya is not acting on behalf of the state of Cameroon. Paul Biya is acting on his own personal behalf. When they come and announce some of these deals, they say that, oh, Cameroon is going to get so much, $1.5 billion euros or pounds, and that it will help the Cameroonians. But you see where that money ends up. With people like Mr.
Exactly.
Yes, you remember? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Exactly. No, I'm just confirming what you're saying, that the monies that come into the coffers of, I guess, the oil company, which never really is accounted for because it's quote unquote off budget, is Paul Biya's personal piggy bank. So look at the state of roads in Cameroon, look at the state of the hospitals in the country, look at the infrastructure, and this is just, I think, a peek into the reasons why, the country is where it is, and why there is boiling anger against the system, a system that has been there for 75 years, since the end of World War II, since the French became a mandated authority in that part of the world.
Yes, and when I was talking of these investors, I was really thinking about New Age, because remember, New Age is a British company. Remember, they made a whole big announcement about their involvement in the place. And I think there's another one, a Russian company. That one, I think that one kind of sneaked in there, because it's just through reading that you find out that they are part of this. But New Age made a big deal about their involvement in Cameroon, and what the money would do.
Yeah, you're referring to this deal they signed regarding the, I think they call it the Itinde gas deal.
Yes.
New Age is a 35.7% partner. I think Lukoil, which is a Russian company, also has 37.5%. So between both of them, they have 75%. And the government of, or more appropriately, Paul Biya and his friends have 25% of it. The British, I think the guy who made that announcement, I think his name is Liam Fox.
Yes.
International Trade Secretary for Britain, he could care less about what happens to black people in Africa. He could care less, when he comes and talks about what the money is going to be used to. He's not fooling anybody, and he's not even fooling himself. They are clowns. They cannot be taken seriously when they make such declarations. I want to read
a little a write up here. I'm going to read it the way it's written, and because when we, and I think when we start talking about New Age, we are assigning responsibility for the death, for the genocide going on in Cameroon right now. Here is what a gentleman called Ite wrote. Okay. According to Israeli human rights lawyer Ite Mark, who campaigned to increase transparency in Israeli defense export, the arrangement between the BE and Israeli trainers is highly unusual. It's a very rare situation that Israel is approving someone to conduct a unit, he says. Mark explains that Moaz, Zuckerman, and their colleagues will need licenses from the Israeli government for their work in Cameroon. Mark says it's unlikely they would circumvent this requirement. Nobody is ready to violate this rule because it will be considered as a criminal security offense, he says. It's like being a traitor. Moaz is doing it with a license from the Israeli government for sure. He's not doing it on his own as a private citizen. So all of these, what is happening in Ambazonia and the work of these Israelis, it's endorsed and supported by the Israeli government.
It certainly is. All you have to look is the response, the response of the Israeli Foreign Affairs Ministry spokesperson made.
Yes.
He basically said, we don't have to give an explanation.
Yes, and let me.
Such arrogance in the context of hundreds of villages that have been burned, in the context of over 500,000 internally displaced persons. You have a citizen of your country that probably has the green light of his state.
No, he doesn't probably. He has the green light of his state. He doesn't probably. He has the green light. Let me just read this part.
Let me finish my point.
Okay.
Hold on. When you are queried about it and your response is, we don't have to give an explanation. What that tells you is, it reminds me of what François Mitterrand said about the Rwanda genocide. In places like that, the genocide is not important. So what this spokesperson is indicating in that those 500,000 people who have been displaced, those hundreds of villages that have been burned, those infants that have been killed, the infirmed, the old that have been trained with the green light of the State of Israel through this individual who apparently cares more about apes. He runs an ape sanctuary in Cameroon than about Ambazonian human beings. Black lives do not matter in the eyes of these people. And obviously, Amba lives do not matter in the lives of these people, or Cameroonese lives do not matter in the eyes of these people. That is what that response tells me.
Yes.
And again, as I said, it brings me back to what François Mitterrand said about when he was confronted with what was happening in Rwanda. In places like that, a genocide is not important.
Yes. In support of that, here's what Mr. Itemak says. The Israeli embassy in Yaoundé directed us to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel. Their spokesperson said they will not comment, adding, "We don't have to give an explanation." The Ministry of Defense refused to provide specific information, but said that export licenses are subject to constant scrutiny and periodic assessment by the senior echelon of the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So as long as they are, yeah, go ahead, please. I think if you have a comment.
No, I'm done.
Yes. So it is endorsed, and that's what this other gentleman is saying. Mark believes the Israeli government position on the matter may be strategic. Paul Biya is one of the most reliable friends of Israel in the whole of African continent. He says the payoff for Cameroon to support Israel openly in international forums. Cameroon is an important part of helping Israel to get legitimacy. It's all part of the geopolitical fight with the Palestinians. The Israelis are murdering Africans who Biya is supposed to be their president and supposed to be responsible for their welfare, in order that he support Israel, who is having support from the United States and all over the world. Isn't that amazing?
It's absolutely amazing, and you couldn't have said it any better.
So my brother, now that we know how much Mr. Iran has been paid, and we know his ineffectiveness, it seems to me that Africans should be feeling very good about themselves, that really anybody could have done that work. So this must have just been a psychological thing, because I do not see the value added to Mr. Biya's security, because the Ambazonian, like you rightly said, fighters who are fighting without any weapons have kept B at bay for over 3 years now.
Well, maybe it was planned that way. It is about the personal security and well-being of one person, Mr. Paul Biya. It is about his personal security. He's the ultimate commander of that force. He's the one who pays the piper. So maybe it's not an effective fighting force. Maybe it's not an effective deterrent, right? But maybe they surround his palace, and that's good enough for him. I mean, there was a time in the early 90s where he said something like, "Tant que Yaoundé respire, le Cameroun vit." You know what I'm saying? So it's all about him.
What does that mean? Could you translate it, please?
Loosely, that so long as Yaoundé is breathing, Cameroon will live. So it doesn't matter what happens in Garoua or Douala or Betwa or Bafoussam or so long as in other words, you were saying that so long as Paul Biya is secure and fine, the rest of you can go to hell. So who knows? Maybe that in some kind of Freudian way, this is Biya saying that it's ultimately all about me, not even about his fellow citizens. And to bring in the French angle, that would suit the French very well, because one of the things that we've talked about in the past that undergirds the French Brazzaville, as was explained during the Brazzaville conference, is that these individuals who run these countries, who are quote unquote presidents of this country, are being held personally responsible, right? Mm-hmm. That's what the Brazzaville Declaration said, right?
Yes.
That they're being held personally responsible, and they'll earn their spurs, as they serve, the French state, and that the only independence of one will be the independence of France.
Of France, yes.
So if Biya is personally secure, right?
Yes.
It works well for everybody. The French do not have to get involved in the details. They have, they are the strategic, partner. They are the strategic overlord. And the Israelis can come in and kind of freelance, and get as much money as they want out of the place. So long as the asset is there, performing as he was groomed to perform, I think it suits everybody, except obviously the poor Africans in Cameroon and Ambazonia.
Let me ask you this question. Do you think, because you've used the word expose here a few times, do you think the performance of B in Ambazonia has exposed them, and therefore any psychological defeat or any psychological effect that the Cameroonese had in fear of B should really disappear and let them take them on? You understand what I'm saying?
That remains to be seen. The Ambazonian people, the people of the southern Cameroons, have been at the forefront of even the infinitesimal, concessions that the French Empire have given the people of that country. Whether it's suppressing exit visas, so-called multi-party democracy, everything, the Ambazonian people have been the one leading the way. They are the ones who sacrificed. And if the Ambazonian people have helped demystify this much feared deer and have given the Cameroonese permission, to rebel.
Yes.
That would be great, but that remains to be seen. But given what the Cameroonese were saying, before the deployment of this evil force, I mean, they were like, in 5 minutes, the beer will go in there and you guys will be done.
Yes.
That's what they were saying. And that they were cheering Biya. They were like, go get those rats, go get those dogs. Beer is coming. So that gives you an idea of how powerful they thought this paper tiger was.
Yes.
But it remains to be seen if they have the courage to take on Biya's private militia, backed by the state of Israel and people like Iran Moaz.
We have talked about everybody else except we need to mention that most of the acquisitions of Mr. Iran Moaz around the world have been through Switzerland. His representatives have been through Switzerland, and we know what Switzerland has been as far as the Ambazonian struggle has. Isn't that something worth noting?
I think I said in the past when I had a chat with you in referencing an article which was written a few years back called the sinister face of neutrality, in which the Swiss were shown to have collaborated with the German National Socialists and engaged in...
Why don't you just call it the Nazi Party? The Nazi Party.
Well, one could say that as well. I prefer using the word the German National Socialists. I think we all understand who we're referring to, And, so they have this unrepentant attitude in helping merchants of death, and after what we have witnessed in Ambazonia, and even before Ambazonia in Cameroon in the north, where a lot of the atrocities were attributed to the bears, we can definitely say that this person is a merchant of death. And the Swiss are very, very comfortable historically. I mean, these are a people, right? This is a state, Switzerland, that used to have gold fillings taken out of the mouths of the teeth, the dental fillings taken out from dead corpses during the Holocaust. You know, I'm not making this up. Read that article. You know, so they are very comfortable dealing with characters like this. And obviously, we're talking about the victims here being black people, Africans, who count for nothing in their eyes. And my research into the role of the Swiss historically, into their banking secrecy laws, points to a people who are not charitable at all. And when they offer their hand, man, you better step back and don't shake that hand. Maybe use a broom, to sweep it before you can even get close to it.
Well, here
they are the financiers, or they carry out the transactions that this Moaz guy, his financial transactions around the world. It seems to me.
Yes, I just want to clarify that Mr. Eran Moaz is represented by a law firm, Coley and Partners, based in Switzerland. So I know you talk about Switzerland, the state, but I think we should be very specific who is representing them, and when the authors of this article call them, they will not make a comment, and it's partly because most of what Mr. Eran Moaz actually operates around the world as though he knows that there's something wrong with the money he's making, and because he's not spending it freely, and he's not purchasing property like you and I will purchase property, and he is being represented by this one company which it's based in Switzerland, and just makes the whole thing really, really dark.
Well, one of the things that the reporters in this piece pointed out was that he has the company that he formed all of a sudden to provide security for the port in Douala is registered in Panama. It is registered in one of, what do they call these things?
Secrecy states or something like that. That has secrecy laws.
One of those yes, and that process was handled by the same Swiss firm.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
So the Swiss law encourages firms to conduct business with people like this. So I do not make a distinction between whether it's a private Swiss law firm. The Swiss government, the Swiss state has laws that encourage this type of behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to black people, they don't, I think it's even more, it becomes more difficult for us to take, because we know what their history represents,
Well, in conclusion, let me ask you this. Do you think, obviously this article is an article that's not welcomed by Mr. Eran Moaz. Do you think the very challenging environment for white supremacists in the world right now is making the Swiss and those who look at Africa as a place where they can go and kill, and the lives there don't matter? Do you think this will that the atmosphere since the death of George Floyd and the world reaction to it, do you think this will make a dent in terms of how they start viewing Africa and how they start treating the humans that were created by God in Africa?
Not without a resolute angry, determined, defiant effort from black people. You know, and I use the word black people because I'm talking about Africans and I'm talking about African Americans, right? This is a window that should enable us to use this rage and this sadness, right? You know, to defend our humanity, right? I think more than ever before, a lot of white people in the world are beginning to open up their minds, right? They are beginning to lay, you know, to lay down their guard, and they are willing to look at the black person, the black humanity differently, you know. So it's definitely an opportunity. But the institutions of power, the institutions of money, the institutions of profit, like the Swiss, no, sentiment doesn't come into their calculation, and they will not cede anything without us, right?
Yes.
Black folk.
Yes.
Absolutely demanding it, relentlessly demanding it.
Forcefully demanding it, yes.
Yes, yeah. So that is my point of view. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Well, it does, and I'm glad you mentioned institutions, because you see the rage that I just explained, which is you know, obviously very, very explicit in the West right now and all over the world. It's mostly citizens expressing this wish. You do not hear any of it coming from any of the governments. You do not hear any of it coming from any what you just call money-making institutions like corporations. Well, corporations in the United States are responding, but I think they're responding more because of their pocketbook, not so much because they really feel like there's a need. So I guess my point here is that the institutions like the United Nations, the African Union, the governments are really the forces that create this power play where they go in and just murder the citizens of one country without care, without remorse. So I am agreeing with you that these institutions remain very resolute in terms of the status quo. And Terence, I really want to thank you for coming to the show again and bringing a lot of insights to some of these things. Do you have anything to say in conclusion, sir?
No, I don't. Thank you for having me, and it's always a pleasure.
Thank you.